In a world marked by racial divisions, inequality, and identity conflicts, asking who Jesus really was is not just a historical curiosity, it is a deep act of spiritual and social reflection. For centuries, white and European images of Jesus dominated churches, paintings, and movies, shaping not only the way the world sees him, but also how the faithful see themselves before him. But what if this image was incomplete? What if there was a forgotten part of this story? A hidden, suppressed, deleted African heritage. Rediscovering Jesus' identity as a non-white man is not just to correct art or culture. It is to open a space for justice, representativeness, and reconciliation. Because when we deny the ethnic diversity of Jesus, we also deny the plurality of divine love. In this video, let's dive into this forgotten story, explore the evidence, and reflect on what it means to see Jesus from a new perspective and why it matters more than ever today. Before we start this story, I want to make a simple but very important request. Write here in the comments the city and the country you are watching from. Because while this prophecy unfolds, while signs appear all over the world, I want to know where you are, where you watch, where you expect. Each name, each place is like a lit candle in the middle of darkness. And enjoy this video and subscribe to the channel, because this journey is just starting and you won't want to be left out of the next chapters. Now, take a deep breath, because what you will hear next maybe change the way you see the times we live forever. The figure of Jesus that most of us know, light skin, blue eyes, brown or blonde hair, did not come by chance. This image has been carefully built over centuries, shaped by artists, religious leaders, and political interests. As Christianity expanded through Europe, especially after the Roman Empire adopted faith as official, the representation of Jesus began to align with European aesthetic and cultural standards. It was not just a matter of art, it was a form of power. Showing a Jesus similar to European rulers and elites helped legitimize hierarchies, strengthen structures of domination, and justify the centralization of religious authority. Thus, gradually, the image of the Jewish Jesus born in the Middle East, connected to Africa, was replaced by a Eurocentric figure, erasing his original ethnic roots. But this construction was priced. It excluded millions of non-white faithful to see themselves. Reflected in this Salvador himself, is it time to undo this image? Jesus was born in a land of encounters, intersections, and diversity. The first century Judea was situated in the heart of commercial routes that linked Africa, Asia, and Europe. Jerusalem was a true mosaic of cultures, tongues, and ethnicities. Unlike the modern view of rigid borders, the ancient world lived a constant flow of peoples, ideas, and traditions. This geographical context makes it highly likely that Jesus shared common traits from the Middle East and North Africa populations. Her skin, hair, and features were probably quite different from the popular white images later. To ignore this context is to deny the historical reality of the environment in which it lived. Understanding Judea as a point of convergence among continents forces us to see Jesus as part of this diversity. He was born and lived among mixed peoples, surrounded by African and Asian influences. Rescuing this scenario not only expands our historical understanding, but challenges racial stereotypes that have been imposed on your figure over the centuries. Few episodes of Jesus' childhood are as symbolic as escape to Egypt. Alerted in a dream, Maria and Joseph took the boy and left for African lands, seeking refuge from Herod's threats. This moment, recorded in the Gospels, is not just a biblical detail. He directly connects Jesus' trajectory to the African continent. Egypt, a historically African territory, became the first home of Jesus outside his homeland. And there, among dark-skinned peoples, the sacred family found protection, welcoming, and anonymity. Think about it. If Jesus, Mary, and Joseph had such different features from the Egyptians, they would not have gone unnoticed. This escape reveals more than a geographical displacement, reveals cultural and ethnic affinities with the African people. Egypt was a shelter, a sacred soil that welcomed the Savior when the world seemed threatening. Rediscover this bond with Africa resignifies our vision of Jesus and brings his history closer to the racial diversity he actually represented. The Judea of Jesus' time was neither isolated nor homogeneous. It was deeply connected with North Africa through commercial routes, political alliances, and migrations. African descent circulated through the cities of Palestine, just as Jews frequently traveled to Egypt and African regions. Dark-skinned peoples were part of the cultural, religious, and economic daily life of the region. The same Bible mentions Ethiops, Egyptians, and other African peoples interacting with the Jews. Ignoring this presence erases an essential element of the diversity of the world in which Jesus lived. Moreover, the Jewish tradition had old ties with Egypt, from the days of Exodus to the Jewish communities that remained there. This multicultural environment suggests that Jesus grew up surrounded by faces and stories from Africa as well. Understanding this context deconstructs the idea of an exclusively white or European biblical world and reminds us that the Christian faith was born of a plural, vibrant, and deeply diverse soil. Among the most moving moments of the Passion of Christ, there is the scene where Simon of Cyrene is called to help Jesus carry the cross. This detail, sometimes forgotten, carries a deep meaning. Cyrene was a city located in North Africa, in what is today Libya. This indicates that Simon was probably a dark-skinned African man present in Jerusalem to celebrate Easter. Imagine, at the hardest moment of Jesus' life, when the weight of the cross was unbearable, an African man helped him to the Calvary. This gesture unites its stories in a symbolically and literal way, showing how Africa was present on the path of redemption. More than physical aid, Simon's presence highlights solidarity and shared humanity beyond racial borders. In the heart of Christian history, there is a black hand holding the cross alongside Christ. Rediscovering this scene is to remember that from the beginning, the Christian faith has been built with African faces and hands. While European art painted Jesus with light skin and Western traits, Egyptian and Orthodox Coptist churches of Ethiopia maintained another image. For centuries, they represented Jesus with dark skin, curly hair, and African features. For these communities, this image was not a provocation or rupture. It was the natural expression of its faith and cultural context. In ancient icons, frescoes, and manuscripts, the face of Christ reflected the characteristics of the people who worshipped him. This preserved iconography challenges the Eurocentric narrative that dominated global Christianity. It shows that far from Europe, African communities continued to honor a Jesus who seemed to them without submitting to the impositions of a white aesthetics. Rediscovering these images is to rescue a visual memory erased by cultural and religious colonization. They invite us to look beyond the European frames and realize that Jesus' face has always been diverse, plural, and deeply rooted in Africa. The transformation of the image of Jesus into a white man was not an artistic accident. It was a deliberate choice, built over the centuries to meet political, cultural, and religious interests. As Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire and spread to Europe, leaders realized that portraying Jesus in the image of the rulers legitimized power and hierarchy. Greco-Roman iconography began to shape Christ's face. Light skin, straight hair, clear eyes. This figure became a symbol not only of faith, but of authority and cultural supremacy. With colonialism, the white image of Jesus was exported to the world, used as a tool for spiritual control and ideological justification. African and indigenous peoples were taught to worship a God who did not look like them, reinforcing ideas of racial inferiority. This bleaching not only erased the ethnic origins of Jesus, but legitimized systems of domination. To recover your true image is to break with this story of oppression and exclusion. When European missionaries crossed oceans with the cross in one hand and the sword in the other, they took an image of white Jesus. This figure, associated with European power, became an instrument of spiritual and cultural domination. For centuries, enslaved African peoples were forced to worship a savior who resembled their oppressors. The white image of Christ was used to justify slavery, colonization, and dehumanization of non-white peoples. It was as if divinity were linked to clear skin, and therefore moral and political authority as well. This use of faith as a control tool has planted deep wounds that still echo in Black and indigenous communities. Accepting Jesus often meant denying his own identity and ancestry, but this distortion does not reflect the true gospel. As we recover the African heritage of Jesus, we reject the ties of spiritual colonialism and reconnect with a faith that liberates, welcomes, and represents all ethnicities. Seeing Jesus constantly portrayed as a white man is not just an aesthetic issue. It is a powerful message repeated generation after generation. For many Black Christians, this image has created a silent distancing, a sense of non-belonging. How to worship a God who seems oblivious to his reality, his color, his story. This representation influenced self-esteem, identity, and spirituality, planting subtle doubts about the value of blackness in the eyes of divinity. In addition, it reinforced power structures within the church itself, where the pattern of holiness and leadership was associated with light skin. This racialized psychology did not happen by chance. It was the result of centuries of indoctrination, but the rediscovery of a Black Jesus has the power to heal ancient wounds and restore spiritual dignity. Seeing Christ with African features is not just a historical correction. It is a divine hug that reaffirms, you were also made in the image of God. It is a message that transforms both faith and identity. In recent years, a wave of theologians, artists, activists, and faith communities has sought to claim the image of Black Jesus. This movement is not just a matter of aesthetics or representation. It is a response to centuries of silencing and distortion. In churches, universities, and cultural spaces, the desire to retell the history of Christ grows from their African and Oriental roots. This rediscovery challenges the Eurocentric narrative that dominated Christendom for so long and offers a path of healing and empowerment. Seeing Jesus with Black features, with dark skin and curly hair, is not to create a new Jesus, is to restore one that has always existed but has been hidden. For many Black faithful, this image breaks internal barriers, rescues spiritual self-esteem, and offers a mirror of dignity and belonging. To claim Black Jesus is to say that the deity transcends race, but never denies the reality of color. It is an act of faith, resistance, and justice. The image of a Black Jesus is not just a cultural representation, it is a symbol of resistance. In a world marked by systemic racism, police brutality, and inequality, recognizing Christ as a racialized man connects his history to the pain and struggle of today's marginalized. For many, Black Jesus represents a God who understands suffering, who walks alongside the oppressed and challenges the structures of injustice. During movements such as Black Lives Matter, his image was erected on posters, murals, and sermons as a spiritual scream against oppression. Seeing Black Jesus is to remember that the Savior did not come from the palace, but from the peripheries, not the throne, but the streets. His life reflects the struggle of those who resist, who carries the cross of prejudice and exclusion. From this perspective, Black Jesus not only comforts, he calls, challenges, encourages not to shut up in the face of injustice. It is a living faith embodied in the search for freedom. The image of Black Jesus not only challenges secular culture, also challenges the church's own structures. For centuries, Western Christianity promoted a Eurocentric view of faith, where holiness, power, and authority were associated with whiteness. To question the color of Jesus is also to question the foundations that sustained exclusions, hierarchies, and prejudices within religious institutions. This rediscovery requires a deep theological review, a willingness to look at the scriptures and the story with new eyes. Seeing Jesus as a racialized man challenges churches to become more inclusive, more diverse, more aligned with the original gospel message. It is an invitation to abandon images and practices that reinforced oppression, and to embrace a faith that celebrates the plurality of faces that reflect the image of God. The challenge is great, but also liberating, because by overthrowing white idols, we make room for a Christ who really belongs to all nations and races. Restore the image of Black Jesus goes far beyond an academic or aesthetic debate. It is a deeply spiritual, moral, and political act. It means confronting the lies that were built to justify oppression and reaffirm the truth of a God who became human in a marginalized body, in a colonized people, in an unfair world. This restoration breaks the currents of a manipulated gospel to serve the powerful and returns Christ to the arms of the oppressed. Politically, it challenges systems that still use religion as a tool for exclusion and domination. Spiritually, healing ancestral wounds, reconciling fragmented identities, and returns dignity to Black peoples. It is an act of recognition and reparation, a step towards a faith that reflects justice, equality, and inclusive love that Jesus preached. Recovering your true image does not erase its universality, but strengthens it. Because a faithful Christ to history is a Christ capable of transforming hearts, communities, and structures. Rediscovering the forgotten story of Black Jesus is not just a look at the past, it's a window to the future. By restoring this narrative, we pave the way for a more authentic, more inclusive, and more faithful faith to historical truth. This rediscovery challenges prejudice, heals invisible pain, and returns voice to the silenced. To see Jesus as a Black man is to recognize that the Savior walks with all the marginalized, that his message is for all colors, cultures, and nations. For the church, it means embracing diversity as part of the divine plan, not as a threat. For society, it is an invitation to reimaginate justice, equality, and empathy. And for each of us, it is a deep reminder: God became flesh, not in the skin of the powerful, but in the body of those who carried the color of resistance on their face. This rediscovery does not end here. It calls us to continue the journey, to question, to learn, to love more depth, and perhaps seeing faith with new eyes. If this story spoke to you, if something inside your heart has been touched, then don't keep it just for you. Like this video now, so that more people can hear this message. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications, because the journey of rediscovering the true story of Jesus is still just beginning. And before you leave, tell me here in the comments, what city and country are you watching? I want to know where these new voices are emerging from, these new looks, these new seeds, because each place, every name, every story matters, and together we are rebuilding a fairer, more inclusive, and more true faith. Thank you for being here. Until the next video.